Business editor Xolani Mbanjwa joins us now from the G20 finance track meetings. Xolani, the first gathering of finance ministers and central bank governors ending without a consensus statement from member countries on various issues. Do talk us through that and other major takeaways.
Good evening, Tumi Sang. That has been indeed the announcement by Finance Minister Nkodo at the conclusion of this first meeting of finance ministers and central bank governors, saying that he is unhappy that there is no consensus from some countries. Usually at the end of this particular G20 meeting of the finance track, there is a statement that is released from the G20, or if there is no consensus, a chair's statement is released, which is a statement made by those who are leading the different tracks in the G20. And Finance Minister Nkodo was not willing to reveal much as far as issues that have led to the lack of consensus, except to say that this is not the first time in Indonesia during that G20 there was no consensus at the first meeting. Remember, this was the agenda-setting meeting. There are 4 other meetings that will take place before the big get-together in November. And he says this is something that happens from time to time, but it is revealing that he said that it was issues that one country raised in particular about how the world seems to be focusing a lot on climate finance and leaving other issues that are quite important. And these issues include the debt levels, the rising debt burden that African nations face, and including the global conflicts. And one country which he would not name had raised the issue, saying they will not be party to a consensus statement being released because they are unhappy about how the world has put so much emphasis on climate finance, something that is quite important. We saw it also at the Finance in Common Summit happening right next door on the sidelines. He wouldn't say which other issues have been raised, but on other matters that are actually important, there has been a discussion on the high debt levels on the African continent and the fact that unfairly the global funders who are actually having the deep pockets are actually putting an unfair premium, risk premium on African nations, and saying that if you're going to invest with you, we need you to pay more back to us in interest because you are a risky investment, something that many African countries have been talking about next door at the Finance in Common Summit, but also here at the G20. And there has been other issues in terms of the uncertainty, in terms of the global economic outlook. Every central bank and every finance minister, as we heard earlier on, is in agreement that the global economy is under strain, and there is a lot that is making people uncertain about where the world is going, although inflation has receded. But be that as it may, this first meeting has come and gone with all flags represented, including the United States.
On that note, Xolani, I wanted to actually add that, of course, we know that there are geopolitics at play, and wanted to just find out whether representation was indeed that of all member states being represented at that gathering, but also what happens now?
What happens now is that this is the first of 4 meetings. By the time the November summit of global leaders takes place in South Africa, there will be a meeting in Durban, in Zimbabwe in June, but the next meeting is in Washington, D.C. And you know the frosty relationship between the United States-led Donald Trump term and South Africa. That is going to be interesting to actually see. This meeting that will take place in Washington, D.C. is still a South African G20 presidency meeting. It was just that before the Donald Trump presidency came up and they won the election, it had been agreed by the United States, the previous administration, that they would handle the cost and the hosting of that particular meeting. So that next meeting in April is going to take place, and that is where many of the topical issues on climate change, to issues on debt, issues on sustainable development goals are going to be trashed out by finance ministers and central bank governors. But there will be other 7 tracks that are still going to meet in South Africa. We will hear that there will be a lot of meetings that will be taking place. But this was the first one this year of senior leaders that have been meeting here in Cape Town. Quite astonishing that there has been quite a good turnout and a robust discussion on a number of issues, such that, Tumisang, there hasn't been consensus. It just goes to show how much the robust nature, rather, of the discussions that took place behind closed doors for the past 4 days.
Newzroom Afrika business editor Xolani Mbanjwa talking us through the close of that G20 meeting of central bank governors.